Are you thinking of entrepreneurship? Do you even know what entrepreneurship means? Let's talk about it. So for example, let's say you had a rich relative that offered to give you $10,000 to launch a business, right? What would you do with that money? What would you do in order to create a successful, thriving business that not only paid that money back, but also gave you income or residual funds, possibly for the rest of your life? That's what entrepreneurship is about, is looking at what opportunities are out there in the marketplace and how do we capitalize on them in order to have a successful business. Let's define entrepreneurship. What is an entrepreneur? What makes some entrepreneurs successful while others struggle? My favorite quote on defining entrepreneurship is by Howard Stevenson. Howard says, entrepreneurship is a pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. And I love this quote because it defines everything that I have thought about entrepreneurship. It's about pursuing an opportunity. It's about saying, hey, I have the opportunity to pursue an opportunity, but what do I really need? And that's where we're going to discuss some of these opportunities and resources and explain how can we as entrepreneurs find opportunities to pursue, and how can we get the resources we need that are currently controlled, and maybe those are controlled by other people, in order to make them available to us. So resources could be anything that you would need to start and run your business. So let's get into that in a little bit more. Again, you might want to reflect back on this quote at the end of this video to see if it makes more sense to you. If you think about a famous entrepreneur, there's probably many words that you would use to describe them. I like to think of entrepreneurs and what sets them apart from everyone else. Oftentimes we hear the same things when we talk about entrepreneurs. People that take risks, people that pursue opportunities, people that are rich. These are often words and phrases that describe entrepreneurs, but oftentimes if you think about a successful entrepreneur, you could come up with words that are unique to them. So for example, Oprah Winfrey might be philanthropic or helpful or caring or a networker or loving. Those types of words could define her, but those aren't necessarily words you would use to describe all entrepreneurs. So as you think about a famous entrepreneur, what are some words and unique things about them that make them special? One thing I want you to pay attention is you are unique and special as well. There are things that we can help you become a better entrepreneur, but don't give up the unique and special aspects about yourself. Entrepreneurial characteristics are the ones that most people understand about all the entrepreneurs. Are there personal characteristics that are universal to all entrepreneurs? And then another question you might want to ask is, are entrepreneurs born with these characteristics, or can they be learned? So these are a couple questions that I've pondered in the past. What can I do to become a better entrepreneur? Is it something that even if I try, I might not ever be good at? So we don't want to focus on those types of things. We want to focus on what are areas that all entrepreneurs should develop in their skills. You can develop skills and become better at them. What are those skills? How do we want to develop them? And how do we pursue them to increase them? And do I even have to be good at everything? Okay. So one of the activities in our assignments in Module 1 is we're going to be looking at entrepreneurial characteristics. What are skills that can be learned, and how can you identify the level that you're at right now, and what can we learn? We'll go over those later. One of the things I'd like to ask you to think about is, imagine someone writing a biography of you, a history of your life, 10, 20, 30 years from now. What are 5 words that would that person use to describe you? What would you want to be described as? It's probably something that's part of your life already that you would like to either expand upon or make better, but maybe it's something new. This is your opportunity to plan how you're going to form a business that people could theoretically be talking about you for beyond your lifetime. Businesses can last beyond the original founders, and they can become almost an entity to themselves. Think about what those words are that someone would describe the founder, you. One of the differences that most people face when they look to becoming an entrepreneur is that they might have been an employee of someone else in the past, and now they're in charge of their own destiny, creating and starting their own business. So what is the difference between an entrepreneur and an employee? The employee uses resources provided and they make it work, whereas the entrepreneur figures out the opportunity and then makes resources available. So what does the difference between these two definitions mean? It means that employees are provided the resources by their employer. If you're a waiter or waitress in a restaurant and someone spills and breaks a glass, you go to the closet and you would get a broom and a mop, you'd sweep up the spill, and then you go on. Those resources were the broom and the mop so that you could fix the problem. For an entrepreneur, they've got to think about what am I putting in the closet that I'm going to need in order to run my business. Everything that you or the employees need have to be identified by the entrepreneur and placed there and made available to them. What's the difference between an entrepreneur or manager? That's another thing I often hear. The manager is usually someone that comes into a business after it's up and running. Not always, but most times the manager would be involved with planning, organizing, directing, and controlling an existing business. It's somebody that wakes up and the business model's already up and running. They just have to make sure that the customers are happy, the shelves are stocked, the orders are getting placed. Whatever it is that the business does, the manager typically plans, organizes, directs, and controls those activities. The entrepreneur needs other skills. They're the ones that get the business up and running and decide what the vision of the business is going to be, what it's going to look like. Those resources that an entrepreneur needs are different than the manager. Entrepreneurs need grit, vision, and they need to be able to identify the resources they need and the team that they're going to select in order to make the business successful. But when we start a small business, oftentimes we have to become both the entrepreneur and the manager, even though those are two different roles. As the business will grow from an idea to an actual business that's profitable, that's got the business model set up and running on a day-to-day basis, the entrepreneur often tends to adopt more of the roles of the manager. As the business grows, the role of the operator will transition from entrepreneur to manager over time. So, do you have the ability and desire to handle both roles? You may not. I think one of the things that we want to consider in planning is what are the job duties of an entrepreneur? What are the job duties of a manager? The job of starting the business may be very, very different than the job of running the business on a day-to-day basis. So you'll want to think and identify and plan. If you don't like the manager's role, then maybe you just like to be the entrepreneur and you would be better set up with a business that you can get up and running and sell and letting a manager take over, or getting a business up and running and letting a manager take over, and you would be paid as the owner of the business. Next up, we'll talk about grit, the 4 parts of business.